Part 36. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 351. In the previous war, Allied Base No. 1 had never seen a Kirov airship, underestimated the enemy, and was not well prepared. As a result, it suffered a heavy bombing by 3 Kirov airships and ushered in its demise. Disaster. Since then, the Allies have tried their best to increase the construction of air defense forces, so that they could quickly destroy 3 Kirov airships before. However, even if they succeeded in destroying it, they paid some price, and the tank factory was blown up. Well, now, 6 more Kirov airships have arrived. Allied Base No. 4 stretched their necks and stared, some even yelled, and some even started to panic. However, these 6 Kirov airships were already targeting them. No matter how much they complained, it was of no avail. They could only mobilize all the air defense forces in the base and prepare to fight. While waiting, 6 Kirov airships finally slowly flew into their range, and a fierce air defense battle broke out. Swish swish swish. Choo choo choo. A large number of multifunctional infantry vehicles fired missiles together, and were assisted by rocket pilots in the sky. Under this powerful firepower, 6 Kirov airships were knocked out just as they approached the base. Nothing can be blown up if it falls into the open space. However, the remaining 5 Kirov airships are still advancing fearlessly. Almost every distance they advance, they will face fierce attacks from the Allied air defense forces. Swish swish swish. Choo choo choo. After continuing to resist for a while, they finally succeeded in breaking into the Allied base. However, during this period, the Allied air defense forces were also firing non-stop. At this time, another Kirov airship was shot down. After shooting down the 2 Kirov airships one after another, the multi-purpose infantry vehicles and rocket pilots also each had one more elite level, which greatly increased their firepower. But this second dropped airship also crashed into the group of infantry vehicles, destroying 2 of them in an instant, one of which was an elite infantry vehicle that had just been promoted. However, the Allied forces here did not care about their own losses for a while. All the air defense forces were firing fiercely, and even the anti-aircraft missiles in the base found their targets and launched heavy missiles. If all the Kirov airships are not shot down, this base will not be saved. Swish swish swish. Swish swish swish. Choo choo choo. At this moment, the Allied air defense forces went crazy. Missiles flying up could be seen almost everywhere, densely hitting the Kirov airship. Rocket pilots all over the sky were also firing desperately, focusing their fire. Next, the 3rd Kirov airship was also successfully shot down, smashing a power plant and killing 5 or 6 Allied soldiers. However, the remaining 3 ships took this opportunity to explore the dark area where the crack generator was opened, found the command post, and flew directly towards it. Don't let them come, quickly, kill them quickly. At this moment, the commander of Allied Base No. 4 panicked and shouted in panic through the wireless. And under his urging, all the air defense forces that were already working hard were squeezing themselves even more, with full firepower. But how can a Kirov airship be destroyed so easily? When the 3 airships approached the command post, they managed to destroy one of them. But the remaining 2 ships have already started bombing. Choo choo choo. Huge artillery shells fell one after another and exploded on the ground, like the scythe of death. The rolling shockwave raged, killing many surrounding Allied soldiers. Even the command post was gradually affected and lost blood quickly. As the command post of a large base, this building has a high HP and is very solid. However, no matter how solid it is still as fragile as paper under the bombardment of Kirov airships. When the bomb was dropped, the entire command post completely exploded. This scene made the guards in Allied Base No. 4 dumbfounded. The command post exploded, the commander died in battle, and the base lost a lot of technology. It was as if the backbone of the base was suddenly gone, and there was no sense of security at all. Buzzing. After succeeding, the two Kirov airships did not give up and continued to change direction and flew towards the last productive building of the base, the Air Command Center. Fight, keep fighting, and beat them down quickly. Although the commander died in the battle, there are still other officials in this base, such as the leaders of various field groups, who are now shouting hurriedly. Of course, compared to the command post and tank factory, the role of the airport is very limited and can only produce fighter jets, but it is also the last productive building in the base. If it is bombed again, the entire base will be completely hopeless. Got it? Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Choo choo choo. After receiving the order, numerous anti-aircraft forces hurriedly started shooting again. The powerful anti-aircraft forces poured into the Kirov airships, and soon another one was destroyed. But the last one had already arrived above the airport and dropped several bombs one after another. The airport was as fragile as a piece of paper and was quickly blown up. The last productivity building was also destroyed. All the officers and soldiers in Allied Base No. 4 were all anxious. The air defense forces were also shooting like crazy. No matter what, they must knock down the Kirov airship first. After blowing up all the productive buildings, the Kirov airship had completed its mission, but under the command of the commander, it continued to exert its residual heat and began to bombard all the surrounding buildings and troops that could be reached indiscriminately. Finally, after blowing up 3 main buildings, 2 defensive buildings, and more than a dozen Allied soldiers, it was shot down by Allied air defense forces. Watching the last Kirov airship fall and hearing the boom, all the remaining guards in the base felt their hearts skip a beat, and a sense of powerlessness emerged from their hearts. Before and after, a total of 9 Kirov airships finally succeeded in blowing up all the productivity buildings in this base at the cost of total destruction. Without these buildings, the No. 4 Allied base would have no choice but to be destroyed or attached to other bases. It would be considered to exist in name only in the true sense. When other Allied base commanders saw the scene through the electronic map, their expressions changed, and a sense of panic arose in their hearts. They had already stepped up efforts to build air defense forces, so why were they still bombed? Is the coalition's aerial death so terrifying? However, now is not the time for them to relax. This time, the coalition forces dispatched a total of 21 Kirov airships. Only 9 of them have been killed now. The remaining 12 are still hanging on the sky. Like a sword above their heads, it could kill them at any time. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 352. Under this life and death pressure, the Allies had to maintain a high degree of tension at all times. At the same time, major bases were trying their best to mobilize air defense forces, taking advantage of this limited time to build anti-aircraft missiles and build multifunctional infantry vehicles. The remaining 12 Kirov airships are still midway, moving in the direction of the Allied forces, but they have not made it clear which Allied base they are heading towards. It can be said that all Allied bases may be targeted. Had to prepare. Although the 21 Kirov airships were built and set off at different times, they were on the same day after all, and the distance between each echelon was not too far. After the 9 Kirov airships in the first 2 echelons were shot down, the 3 Kirov airships in the third echelon quickly arrived at the Allied camp and aimed at Allied base No. 5 and flew over. Observing the movements of these 3 Kirov airships, Allied base No. 5 immediately became highly nervous, concentrated all its air defense forces, blocked the entrance to the base, and stood ready. While waiting, the 3 Kirov airships finally slowly approached here. After entering their range, all the air defense forces opened fire in an instant. In order to target the Kirov airships of the coalition, the Allies were very careful during this period. The air defense force erupted from the Allied base No. 5 was actually much more violent than that of the No. 4 base. The missiles were like they shot into the air like money. They were densely packed in a large area. There were nearly 30 rocket pilots gathering in the sky to fire. For a while, the sound of missiles and artillery was endless. After a period of sustained counterattack, the 3 Kirov airships were barely able to break into the Allied base. When they failed to search the 3 major buildings of the tank factory, command post, and airport, they were captured. Shoot them down one by one. Previously, they broke through the defense line of Allied Base No. 4 and destroyed 3 productivity buildings. However, the coalition forces dispatched 9 Kirov airships in a row to barely achieve it. But just now we faced Allied Base No. 5, which had more firepower than Base No. 4. Just 3 Kirov airships were trying to break through. Naturally, they couldn't get in. At best, they would just fall down and be crushed to death. They just killed some soldiers, and it can be said that they made no achievements at all. Seeing this battle, the coalition forces and many commanders all frowned and were very dissatisfied with the result. But no one spoke, they just focused their attention on the remaining 9 Kirov airships. In the 4th echelon, there were also 6 Kirov airships. They seemed to have been warned by the previous air raids. The commanders of the 2 bases had communicated specifically, and the 6 Kirov airships converged halfway. Together, they rushed towards Allied Base No. 9. According to the experience of previous battles, it is difficult for 3 Kirov airships to bomb the Allied base. But with the number doubled and 6 Kirov airships deployed together, it is not a problem to bomb an Allied base. Of course, this is just an idealized analysis. On the battlefield, the war is changing rapidly, and the Allies are not fools. Not all bases will defend in such a step-by-step manner. For example, Allied Base No. 9 is very flexible in its deployment of troops. If 6 Kirov airships were deployed together, it would indeed be difficult for them to defend, but this base chose to take the opposite direction. Before the Kirov airships could get close to them, there were more than 20 multifunctional infantry vehicles, more than 30 rocket pilots left the base and began to intercept them halfway. Kirov airships basically rely on their extremely high armor and health to carry out Allied attacks and bombard targets. However, it was intercepted in advance and was too far away from its target. Even if it wanted to be bombed by force, it couldn't be done. As a result, all 6 Kirov airships here were shot down before they could get close to Allied Base No. 9. Damn it! The Allies are already so vigilant. The air defense force in the base has increased sharply, and the role of Kirov airships has also been greatly limited. You are worthy of being able to fight us to this point. The Allies' response was really slow. Damn it! We gave up other tanks, pooled all our funds, and spent several days building the Kirov airship. Not even a single Allied soldier was killed. Was it defeated just like that? Humph. These Allies are really unambiguous in their attacks. At this moment, the expressions of all the coalition commanders who had seen the battle just changed, and they were extremely sad. The fact that the Allies have been able to compete with the Allied forces for hegemony to this point is really not a waste of fuel. The Kirov airship alone may make the Allies fearful, and it may even gain an advantage, but it still cannot make the Allies defenseless. Even when the Allies have fully adapted to the Kirov airships and this kind of air raids, and built a large air defense force, then the advantages of the Kirov airships will be greatly reduced, and the battle situation will change again. In a stalemate. Thinking of this, many commanders had a headache, and even no longer had any hope for the last 3 Kirov airships. However, the last 3 Kirov airships did not know it and were still approaching the Allied base all the time. The 3 Kirov airships set off too late, and the battlefield area was too large. By the time they approached the Allied camp, it was almost dusk. The 3 Kirov airships aimed at the Allied forces base No. 19. After approaching the target, they made some adjustments, and then rushed in with great enthusiasm. Regarding these 3 airships, not to mention other commanders, even Wang Ling was not very optimistic about them. However, this battle exceeded everyone's expectations. Because the counterattack from Allied Base Number 19 was far less violent than expected. Even when the Kirov airship broke into the base and explored the dark area on the electronic map, there were not many anti-aircraft missiles in it. The existence mainly relies on more than a dozen rocket pilots and a dozen multi-purpose infantry vehicles to support the scene. As a result, after a battle, the three Kirov airships blew up the base's three major productivity buildings at the cost of total annihilation. They even had the remaining power to blow up more than a dozen buildings of various types, killing a large number of people. The Allied guards gave all the coalition forces a big surprise. The combat effectiveness of the major bases of the Emotional Alliance has also fallen a lot. After watching the whole battle, Wang Ling suddenly understood. Yes, Wang Ling, including the previous commanders, had all fallen into a misunderstanding before, thinking that it was not easy to reach the base for this decisive battle. But now this is a new base, and the time for reconstruction and development is not too long. How strong can it be expected to be? What's more, even if the five fingers are all different lengths, let alone the different Allied bases, the combat effectiveness of these different bases is quite different. The decisive battle has begun, and it has been a stalemate until now. It has been quite a while. It has arrived so late, and it has not been able to develop again during the previous stable stage. The overall combat effectiveness of this base is inferior to those before. But the difference is more than 1.5 stars. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 353. The achievements of these last three Kirov airships made many coalition commanders breathe a sigh of relief. Although the Kirov airship is powerful, it is too expensive and time-consuming to manufacture. If 21 Kirov airships were dispatched, but in the end they only blew up an Allied base, it would be a big blow to the coalition forces. Although the cost of 3 Kirov airships is not as much as that of an entire field team, no one can afford this kind of consumption. Now, finally, these 3 Kirov airships destroyed another Allied base, and the 21 Kirov airships destroyed a total of 2 bases. This achievement barely gave these coalition commanders some peace of mind. However, after this battle, these coalition commanders had to re-examine the value of Kirov airships. Although telling the Allies that they did not intend to do so could severely damage the Allies and even bring them disaster, if the Allies were prepared and built sufficient air defense forces, the role of the Kirov airships would be greatly reduced. Now, the war has ended, and the world of Red Alert has entered the Dark Night stage. The Allied and coalition forces have become quiet again, just like two groups of confronting wolves, taking advantage of this rare peaceful stage to lick their own wounds, recovering their respective physical fitness. In this round of bombing, all productive buildings in the 2 Allied bases were destroyed, making it impossible for them to rebuild. However, there are still a large number of soldiers remaining in these 2 bases. Naturally, it was impossible for these troops to admit defeat or wait for death. After the war, the 2 bases dismantled all remaining buildings overnight, while all other guarding troops were integrated into the nearby Allied base. Although this kind of airstrike destroyed 2 Allied bases and reduced the number of Allied bases and commanders, the Allied operations made the remaining Allied bases stronger. It seems Wang Ling couldn't help but feel worried. This Red Alert world is really no better than a game. If you want to completely destroy a base, just bombing the 3 major productivity buildings is not enough. You have to use iron-blooded means to wipe out all the guards in the entire base. There is no difference between surrendering and dying in battle in Red Alert, so it is impossible to expect the enemy to surrender, only to be completely destroyed. After 2 bombings, the Allies have now paid enough attention to the Kirov airships. The previously neglected air defense force has also been strengthened day by day, weakening the role of the Kirov airships. The battle has gradually begun to become stalemate again. Not long after the war, the Allied forces built up their air defense forces and began a retaliatory counterattack. 4 Allied bases each dispatched a large field group, totaling more than 1,000 Allied soldiers and hundreds of vehicles. All kinds of tanks, it can be described as vast. After the 4 field groups were dispatched, they rushed towards the 4 coalition bases. Facing the attacks of the Allied field groups, the coalition forces were accustomed to it and didn't think anything of it. The 4 targeted bases only strengthened some defenses and stood ready. However, this attack was a retaliatory attack, but it did not start a counterattack immediately after the bombing. It was obviously planned and then acted. How could it be so simple? After the 4 major field groups approached the target base, they suddenly changed their direction. They merged into one place and all the troops were concentrated together. They rushed towards the number 11 coalition base and raided it. This sudden change caused the coalition bases that had originally arranged their own defensive lineups to panic. They quickly organized reinforcements and rushed to base 11 collectively. However, the Allies have already prepared for this battle. Where will these reinforcements be given a chance? They all moved forward at a faster pace, and broke into the number 11 coalition base before the major reinforcements arrived, and started a fierce fighting battle. The defense force in the number 11 Allied forces base is also very strong, but this time it faces the attack of the 4 major Allied field groups, and there are more than 20 light prism tanks bombarding the rear. As a player, Wang Ling finds such powerful firepower difficult, let alone other bases. The fierce battle lasted for a long time, and finally the Allied force base number 11 was successfully destroyed. The 4 major Allied field groups also suffered 70% casualties. They wanted to retreat, but were surrounded and annihilated by the reinforcements that arrived later. Originally, the 2 engines started a tug-of-war. Although there were heavy casualties, no base was destroyed except for Wang Ling, an anomaly who caused trouble. But at this stage of the war, it has become more and more fierce. From time to time, the bases of both camps will be destroyed. The entire battlefield of the decisive battle has gradually entered a white-hot state. Wang Ling was naturally watching this battle. Seeing the result, he was so angry that his whole body trembled. As time goes by, Wang Ling spends more and more time in the Red Alert world and gets to know more and more people. Although these are all virtual characters, these characters also have real personalities, as if they are real people. As time went by, Wang Ling no longer regarded this place as a game. On the battlefield of the decisive battle, Wang Ling knew only a few personnel from other coalition bases. However, there was one in the base 11 that had just been destroyed. The original captain of the first unit and now the leader of the group, Zaha. When Wang Ling first arrived at this decisive battlefield, he led his team to destroy an Allied base, angering the Allied forces and sent encirclement and suppression troops to pursue it. At first, 5 troops from 5 major bases came to support, including Zaha. Although they have not known each other for a long time, after all, they have fought together to the death, and it is inevitable that they have a deep war friendship between them. But before that, Wang Ling saw with his own eyes that Zaha was hit by the prism rays of 2 prism tanks and died instantly. With Wang Ling's temperament, could he not be anxious? When the Allies destroyed Allied base number 7, Wang Ling also saw the leader of the lightning team, Lei Ming, die in the electronic video with his own eyes. Now another old friend died. How could he not be angry? However, after being annoyed for a while, Wang Ling suppressed his anger, took a deep breath, and gradually adjusted his emotional state. There is no way, this is war. The root of all evil lies in this battle for hegemony. When the instructor died in the battle, Wang Ling could have a specific target, Agent Tanya, and he could put all his hatred on her. However, These old friends who died in battle all died in the war without a clear goal of revenge. After regaining his composure, Wang Ling could only spread his hatred on all the allies. Allies, just wait for me. Sooner or later, I will repay you tenfold for this loss. Although I don't like this battle for hegemony, but as long as I am here, you can't even think about hegemony. I'm vomiting blood. My cousin will meet tomorrow. I'm single here and it's annoying and scary. My life will be even more difficult in the future. I secretly posted on Moments and blocked a lot of relatives to complain, but the blocked people can also see it. Many people are asking, it is obvious that dozens of clicks are invisible, but only a few of them are actually blocked. Vomiting blood, complaining, the novel that I hope to develop the most has been blocked for several months without any movement. This year's water, could it be more serious? Different dimension. Red alert world. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 354. Wang Ling is a person who protects his shortcomings and values friendship. Although he doesn't like fighting, watching his old friends die one by one in front of his eyes is really too exciting for him. Of course, he secretly swore in his heart that he would severely inflict heavy damage on the Allied forces, but this battle for hegemony affected a wide range of areas, and his oath alone could not change the situation of the war. Moreover, the current coalition base number 15 is not ready to launch an attack yet and is still gathering strength. The decisive battlefield of the entire battle for hegemony is still the same as before. The two sides conquered each other, suffered losses from each other, and were in a stalemate with each other. During the stalemate, time passed day by day. During this period, new bases from both the Allied and coalition forces rushed to the battlefield one after another, further expanding the scale of this decisive battle. However, after suffering heavy losses in the past, the new bases of both sides did not stand at the forefront of the confrontation. They all hid behind the battle lines and grew slowly. After a period of reconstruction, they gradually developed and gradually strengthened the strength of the base. Slowly began to engage in combat. In the past few days, several large-scale battles have broken out between the two sides. With the help of the Allied forces once again wiped out two coalition bases. Another old friend of Wang Ling, Zhang Yang, the captain of the 3rd Unit of Base 9, also died in the battle. The Allies were not having a good time there either. After being attacked by several major coalition field groups, they were bombed by 9 Kirov airships, and 2 bases were also destroyed. As the two sides went back and forth, although the exchange of fire was extremely fierce, they always maintained a balance, and neither one could do anything to the other. Naturally, under the overthrow of the nest, the city's defense line was not immune, and there was a fierce battle. However, with the help of the favorable geographical location, the city's defense line was like an iron barrel, and with the presence of a cheating player like Wang Ling, the Allied offensive failed. Naturally, he had also participated in an attack. It was an attack launched by the Fox Group of Base Number 16 under General Luo Er, led by Qin Ming, after consultation with several other bases, and even built the Kirov Air Force. The boat was also brought on the road. The results were quite fruitful. In this battle, 2 Allied bases were knocked down. However, the price was also very heavy. All the soldiers and tanks involved in the attack, including the Fox Group, were all killed. After General Luo Er sighed, he had to ask for assistance and replenished his troops. Since the war, both sides have become anxious. It seems that any battle can stir up the balance between the two sides, break the deadlock, and win the battle for hegemony with the same result. However, in this kind of war, base number 15 is always accumulating strength, defending rather than attacking. During this period, through the assistance of paratroopers, the number of soldiers in base number 15 increased by hundreds, and they were evenly distributed under the command of the Wolf Group and the Eagle Group. During this period of time, base number 16 has almost finished mining the gem mines on the islands within visible range, and has consumed a large amount of funds. Now it is still sending giant squids to continue looking for new islands, and the 10 bases of number 15 base, the oil production plants, are continuously transporting funds. After accumulating for so long, the wealth of the number 15 Allied Forces base is probably comparable to the combined funds of the 5 or 6 bases. After accumulating funds and strength for so long, General Lewicki finally decided on this day to plan and participate in an offensive plan. As for the field team it dispatched, it was no surprise that it was the Wolf team. After all the cunning shown by Wang Ling were noticed by General Lewicki. Knowing Wang Ling's uniqueness, sending him to fight would definitely achieve something. Wang Ling did not disappoint General Lewicki. He entered the command post in advance to negotiate and proposed an attack plan that even Rowski, a fault-finding guy, said was insidious. After the attack plan was finalized, General Lewicki began to contact other coalition commanders, and at the same time, Kirov airships finally began to be built in the base. After waiting for a day, the first Kirov airship from base number 15 finally appeared. Watching this huge aerial death slowly leaving the chariot factory, Wang Ling also felt a little excited. This was his first time in the Red Alert world to see this killer weapon up close. It was indeed majestic. However, after a moment of excitement, Wang Ling was thinking secretly, if he were to bombard the Kirov airship, how long would it take to knock it down with the firepower of the 7-star ace-level anti-aircraft infantry? This was not easy to estimate. He wanted to try it, but the idea was shot to death as soon as it came up. It is true that base 15 is rich now, but no matter how much money it has, it cannot be wasted like this. The field teams at other bases are ready for battle. Now we just wait for the Kirov airship to be in position. After suppressing that idea, Wang Ling then thought of the next battle. Led by Wang Ling, with the cooperation of other base field teams, and the assistance of Kirov airships, Wang Ling is very confident that he can severely damage the Allies. The decisive battle has reached this point, but it's almost time to end. After fighting the next few wars, you should have accumulated enough points to reach 100,000 to unlock advanced redemption. Thinking of this, Wang Ling couldn't help but look forward to the next battle. Time passed very quickly. After the attack plan was finalized, 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. In these few days, base number 15 finally successfully built 3 Kirov airships. However, Wang Ling was a player, so he would not follow the rules of the coalition. Instead of taking action immediately, he waited for another 3 days until the base produced 3 more Kirov airships before he was ready to mobilize troops. Cooperating with the Wolf Group's attack were 4 field groups from 4 surrounding bases. Under Wang Ling's instructions, a total of 5 field groups broke out of the base and rushed towards the Allied camp. Speaking of which, since entering this decisive battlefield, the Wolf Group has not sent troops to attack except for a surprise attack on the Allied base on the first day. This makes many members of the Wolf Group impatient to wait. Even Sun Dehuthis Leng Zhong urged Wang Ling more than once, but Wang Ling scolded him back every time. Now that there is finally another offensive operation, many old members of the Wolf Group are all in high spirits and marching in formation, very energetic. At the same time as they were moving, 3 Kirov airships in the base were also listed and started moving together. However, the speed of the Kirov airship was too slow. Wang Ling and the others did not wait specially. Together with the other 4 field groups, it took nearly a day to build an Allied base. However, after the troops arrived at the city, all the 5 field groups refused to attack. Instead, they stationed themselves in front of the enemy, as if they were going to spend the night here. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 355. Stationed under the enemy's nose, what do Wang Ling and the others want to do? No need to ask, of course we are waiting for the Kirov airship. Although this kind of aerial death is extremely powerful, its speed has also been criticized by Wang Ling for a long time. In this attack plan, only Wang Ling and his wolf group will actually launch the attack. The other 4 field groups will only cooperate with them to contain the enemy. However, the decisive battle now has become fierce after all. The two sides are fighting with white knives and red knives. After successive battles, many bases on both sides have been destroyed, and the Allies do not dare to be careless at all. Seeing the 5 major field groups coming out and stationed under the noses of the 5 bases, this made the 5 bases very sensitive. They all gathered a large number of troops at the intersection to resist, but they failed to figure out the opponent. Before making a clear plan, they did not dare to rush to send troops to destroy them in advance. Otherwise, whichever base takes action first is likely to attract the other 4 major coalition field groups to attack that base with all their strength, which is not comfortable. Wang Ling and the others were not in a hurry. They arranged for the 2 teams to take turns, and they actually slept in shifts in front of the Allies. During this period, the Allies did not dare to attack rashly, but they did send fighter jets to harass. The base that Wang Ling and the others were targeting was the Allied Forces Base number 14, which was also located in a coastal city. They had even had a fierce naval battle with Wang Ling and the others before. Wang Ling had long been unhappy with them. The incoming fighter jets were Black Hawks. Only 2 were dispatched at a time, and they seemed to be heading for an Apocalypse tank. However, there are nearly 20 anti-aircraft crawler vehicles in the Wolf group. Is it possible to let them achieve their wish? Before he could get close to the tank group, he was beaten down halfway, simply and domineeringly. After this harassment test, the Allied base number 14 also knew that the Wolf group was difficult to mess with, so they simply stayed behind closed doors and huddled all their troops in the base, waiting for the Wolf group to launch an attack and use the terrain to respond to the enemy. Wang Ling and the others were also happy to be at peace, so they worked in 2 shifts. After everyone rested for a while, it was already late at night. At this time, the 3 Kirov airships temporarily delivered to the Wolf group by base number 15 finally arrived nearby. The arrival of the airship also symbolized that the battle was about to begin. All the soldiers in the Wolf group hurriedly cheered up and were ready to fight at any time. At the same time, they were still waiting for Wang Ling's final attack order. However, Wang Ling did not rush to issue orders. He just let the Kirov airship continue to move forward, and soon reached the outer reaches of the city. Although a lot of air defense forces were built, the Allies were still very afraid of the Kirov airship and did not dare to be careless. The god of death in the air was approaching, so the base quickly dispatched more than a dozen multifunctional infantry vehicles and more than a dozen rocket pilots, trying to go out and intercept. However, the Wolf group was watching outside. As soon as he saw these air defense forces, Wang Ling directly transformed into a king-level magnetic explosion infantry. He launched electromagnetic attacks from a long distance, covering all multifunctional infantry vehicles and destroying them in a matter of seconds. They were all blown up, and then transformed into ace-level anti-aircraft infantry again. After several rounds of shelling, more than a dozen rocket pilots were shot down one after another. Now Wang Ling has gradually become a climate. The range and attack power of the king-level magnetic blast infantry are enough to cause heavy losses to most of the troops on the ground. The firepower of his ace-level anti-aircraft infantry is equivalent to 3 elite anti-aircraft tracked vehicles fired a salvo, and it was impossible for an ordinary air force to break through his blockade. As a result, these Allied air defense forces, let alone shooting down the Kirov airship, were killed without even launching a missile. The speed was so fast that even the Wolf group's troops could not come into contact. Team leader, you can't be so greedy. You should at least leave some for us. Sun Dehua was not satisfied and complained. Wang Ling was not surprised and said with a smile, "Don't worry, the general attack will give you all a good fight." He, this feeling is good, Sun Dehua smiled. But Hu Ben was sarcastic from the side, "It's not a good thing to be so belligerent, be careful of being beaten to death." Sun Dehua glared back, I have to live longer than you. Since when are you two still arguing? Just wait for orders." At this time, Bezor interrupted the two of them. After destroying the Allied air defense force, Wang Ling did not rush to attack. Instead, he kept his troops on standby. Almost all his attention was focused on the three Kirov airships, commanding them at any time. The outgoing air defense force was eliminated, and there was no threat now. The three Kirov airships drove straight in, and finally broke into the city. The outer defenses of the city are somewhat similar to those of base number 15 and number 16. A large number of soldiers are stationed in high-rise buildings and surround the city. There are a large number of trees, making it easy to defend but difficult to attack. However, the difference is that this is only the first line of defense for the Allied base number 14. There are no other troops deployed around it. They are all huddled in the city, hiding in the dark area of the crack generator. In this way, Wang Ling's wishes were fulfilled. He commanded the Kirov airships and did not follow the routine at all. The Kirov airships in other bases directly resisted the Allied air defense forces and carried out beheading operations, but Wang Ling just liked to cut off his limbs first. Three Kirov airships flew over and flew past one of the tall buildings where Allied soldiers were stationed. All three airships flew high. They originally flew over the building as ordered, but the three airships, just as he was flying directly above the tall building, Wang Ling suddenly changed his order and asked him to bomb the tall building directly. Choo choo choo. After receiving the order, three Kirov airships immediately dropped bombs, and one only dropped one. The entire building collapsed and exploded in an instant, exposing the Allied soldiers inside, but they were destroyed by subsequent bombs. Blast to death. The giant bombs of the Kirov airship were extremely destructive, but the commanders of other bases just followed the habitual bombing of this airship and dropped bombs from a distance to bomb a very fragile building. 5 or 6 bombs will be used. Under the command of Wang Ling, when a bomb is dropped from the front of the building, only one bomb is enough to blow up a large building. Defensive buildings, such as the Prism Tower, are harder, but bombing from directly above is only a matter of 2 bombs at most. The various military units in Red Alert never worry about ammunition, because in this game and world, there is basically unlimited ammunition, and no matter how indiscriminate bombing, there is no waste of bombs. However, a lot of time is wasted. It takes much more time to drop 5 bombs than to drop 1, right? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 356. There is not much difference between the time it takes to drop 5 bombs and the time it takes to drop 1 bomb. What is the use of saving such a short time? Needless to say, this is really useful. You know, the Kirov airship is too slow after all. When bombing, it basically moves forward with Allied artillery fire. It can be said that it is losing blood every moment. To say that he was shot down from a long distance away, or that Kirov made a great contribution and blew up the Allied productivity buildings before he was shot down, is that the time does not matter. But during the bombing, we often encounter some embarrassing things, that is, we try our best to get close to the target, but we happen to be shot down, or we are shot down while bombing the target building, and the airship falls down and hits us. When the target building has a lot of remaining health, but does not explode after all, the time saved is particularly important. Even half a second more time, even one more bomb thrown, may determine the outcome of a battle. Don't say this is a coincidence. At least when Wang Ling is playing games, this kind of situation is not uncommon. Every time he encounters it, he will be depressed to the point of vomiting blood. Over time, Wang Ling also developed this habit. The Kirov airship must fly directly above the target building and drop a bomb to end the problem directly, saving time, effort and insurance. And this habit was naturally brought to the red alert world. The Kirov airship was not used to his approach. At first, it had to be commanded at all times. After getting used to it, it could be relaxed. The city's defense line at Allied Base Number 14 has many high-rise buildings on the periphery, all of which are occupied by Allied soldiers. 3 Kirov airships blew up a building, but they did not give up yet and continued to attack the city. Under Ling's command, they radiated towards the surrounding buildings. Each time, they flew directly above the tall buildings and dropped bombs collectively. Not only did they blow up the building in the shortest time, but even the Allied soldiers who escaped from the building were also killed. Blast to death. Originally, if it were other coalition forces, facing the defense of these buildings, forcing a breakthrough would consume a lot of troops. However, the aerial bombing of Kirov airships was a forced demolition with zero consumption. For a time, the command of Base 14, the officers were a little dumbfounded. Did the 3 coalition airships take the wrong medicine and do this kind of operation? Is there still such an operation? Of course, it was not only the Allied commanders who were stunned, but even the commanders of the major coalition forces who were paying attention to the battle situation were also a little shocked. What a great idea! Using Kirov airships to bomb these buildings can really blow up the Allies. And this bombing method is also very special. Flying directly above and then bombing, the efficiency is much higher than before. The troops at base number 15? Who is that team leader? You really taught us a lesson through action. This bombing method must be popularized. Good fellow, using a Kirov airship to blow up a building, isn't it overkill? Hey, don't tell me, such a method of bombing is really unethical. Compared to these commanders, General Li Wiki was much calmer. After all, he had known Wang Ling's cunning for a long time and had also learned the attack plan in advance. There was nothing surprising now. And now Wang Ling, looking at the 3 Kirov airships being bombarded unscrupulously, was also clicking his tongue. He was not in awe, but in pity. In fact, he quite wanted to use the Wolf Group's V-3 rockets to bomb these high-rise buildings, and the efficiency would not be low. However, the limitations of the V-3 rocket are also too great. If it is really pulled out, a lot of troops will have to be dedicated to guard it, which is not worth the gain. So for this attack, he even brought the Psychic Force member with, but left those V-3 rocket cars in the base. Choo choo choo. Boom. Just when he felt regretful, the 3 Kirov airships had already blown up a large area of high-rise buildings and cleared an area for safe passage. Moreover, after such a long period of continuous bombing, the Kirov airship has adapted to Wang Ling's operation. It knows how to fly directly above the target's head to bomb without any special orders. These Kirov airships also learned bad things from Wang Ling. Start, move forward. When the passage area opened up, Wang Ling was not idle. He led the Wolf Group to follow up at any time. He quickly passed through this area, but when he was about to go deep into the city, he stopped again and temporarily stationed himself. This large force cooperates with Kirov airships. Naturally, one side is the main attacker and the other is auxiliary. The approach of other bases is basically that ground troops assist Kirov airships. However, Wang Ling is just the opposite. He wants airships to assist ground troops, so he will not launch a strong attack until the Kirov airship has finished bombing. It seems that they also saw the actions of the Wolf Group. Allied Base Number 14 also calmed down at this time, but they did not pay attention to the Wolf Group. Instead, they summoned a group of air defense forces and rushed in this direction, trying to stop them. Kirov airship bombing. Grandma, if you dare to come out, I'll fight. However, Wang Ling was waiting for these air defense troops at any time. As soon as he showed up, he was chased and beaten by Wang Ling. Just like the previous batch, he couldn't fight at all. Even one missile was wiped out by Wang Ling alone. After destroying this group of air defense forces, Wang Ling was not idle. Not far from them, there were also some high-rise buildings where Allied soldiers were stationed. At this distance, the range of conscripts and tanks is simply out of reach, but Wang Ling can. Transforming into a magnetic blast infantry, Wang Ling directly launched a long-distance blast. The entire building quickly lost blood under his electric shock, and then the whole building was blown up. Even the exposed Allied soldiers were electrocuted. Die. In the process, this group of Allied soldiers felt aggrieved, enduring fatal attacks but unable to fight back. But there's nothing you can do about it, you've got short hands, you deserve to be beaten. Sizzling. Sizzling. However, Wang Ling didn't think about knocking down all the high-rise buildings. He just cleaned up the obstructions nearby. Then he calmed down and concentrated on commanding the Kirov airship. After bombing continuously for so long, the threat in this area was basically eliminated, and the 3 Kirov airships then broke into the Allied base. It has to be said that in order to target the coalition's Kirov airships, the Allies really put a lot of thought into it. This base had previously dispatched 2 waves of air defense troops, and all of them were annihilated. However, the Kirov airships broke into the base. At that time, there were still many air defense forces present, and dense missiles bombarded the airships as if they were free. With this kind of offensive, it is impossible for the 3 Kirov airships to bomb the production buildings of this base. However, Wang Ling did not expect to blow them up from the beginning. After the 3 Kirov airships flew into the Allied forces, they did not fly toward the dark area. Instead, they scattered and one ship broke into the Allied forces. Entering a field group, they were bombarded indiscriminately, and large areas of Allied soldiers and tanks were killed and exploded. One of them flew towards the Allied power plant, and after blowing up 2 of them in a row, it immediately cut off the power to the entire base. The other ship was specifically focused on bombing the Allied multifunctional infantry vehicles, and in an instant, 5 or 6 infantry vehicles were blown up. Although these 3 Kirov airships did not launch the most deadly attack, this method of attack was even more unethical, like a tiger entering a flock of sheep. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 357. As for the Allies, they were used to beheading Kirov airships before, and all their defenses were prepared to storm the Kirov airships. However, the 3 Kirov airships commanded by Wang Ling suddenly changed their bombing methods, and the Allies were caught off guard and stunned. Originally, a large number of anti-aircraft missiles were built in the base, and together with other air defense forces, they were enough to intercept 6 Kirov airships. But after the Kirov airship came in, it went to bomb the power plant. 2 power plants exploded in a row, the entire base lost power, and all the anti-aircraft missiles lost their power and became decorations. However, the Kirov airship did not give up and did not give it a chance to restore power. After blowing up 2 power plants, it continued to bomb other power plants. 4 or 5 power plants were bombed by it in succession. The base is working hard to rebuild the power plant, but the power supply will not be restored in a short time. This hand is so explosive. Of course, the other 2 Kirov airships also made the Allies itchy. What do you think the Allied field group's ground troops are doing to you? One of the Kirov airships just stared at this group of infantry and tanks and exploded wildly. These ground troops had no air defense capabilities and could only watch and wait angrily for Kirov's bombing. That huge bomb was dropped in the center of the infantry group, and it exploded into pieces. The tanks were also uncomfortable. The Grizzly tank group was bombarded by several bombs one after another, and a large number of bombs exploded. Even the Prism tank hiding in the distance was hit. Of course, what annoyed the Allies the most was the last Kirov airship. Allied anti-aircraft missiles failed, so the air defense force was naturally left with multi-purpose infantry vehicles and rocket pilots. After 2 rounds of attacks, they were wiped out by Wang Ling. There were not too many of these 2 types of troops left in the base. This airship was still chasing after the multi-purpose infantry vehicles, and wherever there were more infantry vehicles, it blew up 5 or 6 of them in a short period of time. This style of play, of course, also made the Allied air defense forces very angry and the greatest threat. Ignoring the other 2 Kirov airships, they focused all their firepower on this one airship. Finally, it shot down nearly 10 multi-purpose infantry vehicles while destroying them. At this time, the other 2 airships were still bombing in their own way. This group of air defense troops also chose the lesser of 2 evils. They boarded the Kirov airship that bombed the power plant and started firing. After the previous bombing by an airship, the number of multifunctional infantry vehicles in this base has dropped sharply again. However, there are still a lot of rocket pilots, and the assembled firepower is also very fierce. Under the concentrated fire, this second base Love's airship was also quickly shot down. However, during the period of hard resistance, this second Kirov airship had already blown up nearly 10 power plants, and by the way, it also blew up a combat laboratory, making the Allied commanders furious. What was left was the airship that bombed the ground troops of the field group. All the air defense forces focused their fire again and fired continuously for a period of time before finally shooting it down successfully. And this airship was not at a loss. It killed nearly 100 infantrymen and more than a dozen Grizzly tanks. At Wang Ling's signal, the light prism tanks were given special attention. As long as they showed up, they would be blown up first, and some of them would be destroyed. More than 10 cars. The Kirov airship was very expensive, time-consuming, and labor-intensive to build, but no matter what, its value was smaller than the number of Allied troops killed in the bombing. Now, all 3 Kirov airships have finally been shot down. Although these airships failed to blow up even one Allied productivity building, they bombed the number 14 Allied base into a mess. Wow, the explosion made the Allied commander's head hurt. The entire base's defense strength reached a low point at this time. What a great opportunity, brothers, charge me, don't let any enemy go. At this time, Wang Ling saw the opportunity, raised the electromagnetic transmitting device in his hand, and shouted. Roar! Roar! The group of people in the wolf group had been on standby for a long time, and many of them could no longer hold back. With Sun Dehu as the representative, with a roar, the army began to charge collectively. They had already broken through the high-rise defense line outside the city and were very close to the base inside the city. With this charge, they naturally quickly reached the edge of the Allied base. As soon as the 2 sides met, a very fierce exchange of fire began. Rumble! Rumble! The ones blocking the front of the Wolf group are a group of Apocalypse tanks and Rhino tanks. They have high armor and act as infantry shields. Moreover, the firepower of the elite tanks itself is very terrifying. If they come into contact with the surrounding enemies, they will immediately be destroyed. Then there was a rumble of artillery fire, killing large swaths of Allied soldiers, and even some of the Grizzly tanks that came in were blown up one after another. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Behind the tank were the Wolf infantry led by Wang Ling. Any conscripts who could reach the enemy were firing like crazy. Fire snakes were flying densely, beating them mercilessly. Allied peripheral troops. Although the firepower of a single conscript is not as good as that of the Allied soldiers, the number of elite-level conscripts in the Wolf group is very large, and after integration, some paratroopers have been integrated, and the total number is also very large. They are arranged in rows and fire together. The firepower was so fierce that any Allied troops, soldiers, or tanks that broke into its range were all killed in a short time. Sizzle! Sizzle! Wang Ling was not idle either. Under the electromagnetic envelope, dozens of infantrymen were all hit. They were already resisting with difficulty, but now they were in disaster, with large areas dying. The Wolf Group came to this decisive battlefield. Except for the fierce battle on the first day, they were accumulating strength at other times. Now when it broke out, the firepower displayed in an instant was really eye-catching. The Allied base on the 14th had been bombarded by Kirov airships to pieces. The Wolf Squad launched such a rapid attack again that the front-line troops could not resist for long before they were torn open by a huge gap. The gap? After the Allied forces had cleared this area, the tank at the front turned its cold tracks and broke into the Allied base. The soldiers at the rear followed closely behind, and even numerous anti-aircraft tracked vehicles also followed. Not left behind. This round of attack can be said to be fast and fierce. As soon as the Allies recovered from the bombing of Kirov airships, the Wolf Group had already broken into the base, and looking at the posture, it was clearly the entire base is going to be destroyed. This made Allied base number 14 extremely anxious. While urging the troops in the base to go as quickly as possible to eliminate this group of enemy troops, they were also urgently calling for help. Although the total strength of the Wolf Group's field group is indeed not comparable to the number of remaining guards in the base, at this moment, the commander of Base 14 always has a very bad premonition: this battle is dangerous. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 358. After receiving the commander's urging, the field team stationed in the Allied base number 14 quickly reorganized and took action. Among them, the fastest ones were the rocket pilots. It seems that the Kirov airship was attacked before, but the airship was unable to fight back. As a result, this group of pilots felt happy and swelled. Now they rushed over one by one without fear of death, trying to focus on an apocalypse. Tank. Hit them all. However, the Wolf Group is not like the 3 Kirov airships. The air defense force is also very powerful. After observing the flying troops approaching, Wang Ling shouted and transformed into an ace-level air defense infantry, taking all the remaining air defense tracked vehicles with him. Fire together. Dong 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 dong. Dong 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 dong. These tracked vehicles were also lined up in the center of the team, and the high-spirited gun barrels fired a salvo. For a moment, the entire base resounded with soaring gunfire. When these anti-aircraft guns hit the rocket pilots, they immediately exploded into clouds of black smoke. All rocket pilots within this range would suffer splash damage and be attacked in a wide range. Short bursts of smoke appeared in the entire sky. It was shrouded in this black mist for a while, and it looked very heroic. The damage done to infantry by anti-aircraft tracked vehicles is very significant, and among this group of tracked vehicles are several elite-level vehicles, followed by a pervert like Wang Ling. The firepower is so fierce that it almost completely suppresses the Allied air power. Although there were a lot of these rocket pilots, under this kind of suppression, they had no power to fight back. Before they could get close to their target, they were all shot down by these tracked vehicles midway and died heroically. While this group of rocket pilots was charging, other field groups in the base were also operating on a large scale. Within a moment, the closest field group opened the way with infantry and rushed over collectively. Wang Ling immediately transformed back into a magnetic blast infantry, discharged electricity from a long distance, and killed nearly 100 soldiers before it approached, and then fought fiercely with the entire Wolf Group. The Allies are making moves? Assemble, quickly. It's really moving. Brothers, gather and prepare to attack. After all, base number 14 had launched an emergency request for help. After receiving the call, other bases naturally responded. Just when the Wolf Group was fighting, Allied bases number 13 and number 12, which were closest to base number 14, also organized a large field group. After gathering, they left the base. Looking at the posture, they wanted to support them. It's base 14. However, Wang Ling was on guard against these reinforcements in advance, and the coalition field groups originally stationed outside the two bases also gathered together. As soon as the group of Allied reinforcements left, the two field groups gathered urgently. Charge towards the two Allied forces that launched aid. Come back quickly. These coalition forces want to take advantage of the situation. Damn it, why are they stationed outside? They are waiting for us to send reinforcements. Let them come back quickly. We can't put ourselves in danger for the sake of rescue. Observing this scene, the commanders of the two Allied bases suddenly understood. They quickly changed their orders and hurriedly withdrew the reinforcements. Although it is a united front, it is not the same base after all. In this case, they will not put their own base in for rescue. After this group of reinforcements retreated, the two coalition field groups that had been charging stopped immediately, and then leisurely returned to their original garrison point and continued to garrison. That's right, although there were 5 field groups in this attack, only the Wolf group actually launched the attack. The other 4 groups were actually the same as these 2 groups, stationed here to contain other Allied bases. Once these bases send reinforcements, they will prepare to launch an attack and force these reinforcements to retreat. But if there is an Allied commander who is too sacrificing himself for others and has to send troops to support him despite the pressure, then these coalition field groups will really launch an attack, and it is not ruled out that the 4 major field groups will join forces to attack. The possibility of an Allied base. This approach can be said to be completely undisguised and a clear conspiracy, and the Allies can naturally see it. However, they couldn't help it. They didn't want to jump into this pit, so they could only stare. Originally, the battles were stalemate in various places on the battlefield of the decisive battle, basically because each other's reinforcements were really annoying, but before Wang Ling sent out troops, he had a special plan to restrict these reinforcements. How could we let these reinforcements destroy this rare attack? Without the worries of reinforcements, the Wolf group attacked, but let it go completely. Now all members of the Wolf group have invaded Allied base number 14, and all the soldiers are fighting desperately. The Wolf group's attack, at Wang Ling's request, used tanks as cover. Naturally, there were a large number of tanks fighting on the front line, and the sound of rumbling explosions was almost constant. Because of the large number of elite tanks and several elite apocalypses, the firepower of these tank defenses is a level higher than that of the Allied infantry and tanks combined. Every explosion will kill an Allied soldier. Grizzly tanks are also exploding in large numbers. Naturally, the tanks of the Wolf group would explode from time to time, but the losses were much smaller than those of the Allies. At the rear, there is an army of mobilization troops from the Wolf group, hiding behind the tanks and firing with all their strength. The firepower they erupt is even greater than that of tanks. Anti-aircraft tracked vehicles are interspersed among the infantry, specifically attacking the incoming Allied soldiers, and they are sure to steal every one. Even Wit of the Psychic Force mentally controlled a Grizzly tank and ran to the Allied forces to cause trouble. After being killed by other soldiers, he then controlled another Allied soldier, switched sides, and attacked the base. Other guards inside. Of course, the most beautiful thing is the team leader Wang Ling. Every time he launches an offensive, nearly 100 Allied soldiers will be enveloped in electromagnetic fields, or nearly 20 Allied tanks. Under the powerful electromagnetic attack, anyone who is caught when it arrives, there is basically no way to survive. The total number of soldiers in the Wolf group is naturally not comparable to the number of guards in an entire base, but these guards had been stunned by the Kirov airship bombing before. The base was blown to pieces, and the power was cut off, leaving it useless. The light prism tower weakened the momentum. The Wolf group had accumulated enough strength for a long time, and quickly launched an offensive. Under the ebb and flow of one another, the firepower of the Wolf group's soldiers actually suppressed the Allied guards. Under this kind of suppression, the Wolf group also took advantage of the situation to attack fiercely. All the soldiers fired at once, and soon wiped out all the guards who rushed towards them. After the remaining guards showed signs of decline and the momentum weakened, the Wolf Group took advantage of the situation and launched a fierce attack, led by the tanks in front and assisted by various soldiers. It was like a sharp blade inserted into the enemy's chest. All the people passing by along the way, the guards were defeated, and even the major buildings were not spared. All the buildings within reach were demolished. This battle has been fought so far. Allied base number 14 is considered over. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 359. Brothers, Charge. Inserted into the Allied base, defeated many Allied guards, and knocked down a large number of buildings, but there were still many guards and buildings left in the number 14 Allied base. Wang Ling did not intend to let go of these. He raised his right hand that flashed with electricity, shouted and waved forward. At the same time, a brilliant electromagnetic current was launched, covering more than 20 loosely arranged Allied soldiers. Roar! Roar! The Wolf Group was now in full swing. Under this impetus, it became even more crazy. The entire army arranged in a fan-shaped shape with tacit understanding and began a sweep of the entire Allied base. The previous bombing by Kirov airships has completely destroyed a large number of power plants in this base and completely cut off its power supply. Now the Wolf Group is not worried about the restoration of power in this base at all. It can be said that they are unscrupulous in their raids. Leaping under the cave sweep, all the guards and buildings passed along the road were pushed sideways. Under the powerful firepower, there is no enemy at all. Swish swish swish. Finally, when they were about to push to the Allied command post, hiding deep in the base, the 4 remaining light prism tanks opened fire. The light prism rays hit the Apocalypse tank at the front, but a large number of them were connected to the rear. Mobilizing troops, nearly 10 people died in the battle in an instant. Although Allied base number 14 was finished, Wang Ling was still very wary of this thing. He immediately dispatched 3 Apocalypse tanks and rushed over despite the bombardment of the light beam, destroying it in advance. 4 light prism tanks. The only thing they were afraid of was destroyed, and the Wolf Group acted without any scruples, opening up and closing down. Under the concentrated fire, the Allied command post was also overthrown, and then the tank factory, air command headquarters, or refinery, maintenance large main buildings such as factories were also overthrown one by one, followed by prism towers, machine gun bunkers, and anti-aircraft missiles were also pushed over in turn. If this continues, it will only be a matter of time before base 14 is wiped out. However, when there were only a few Allied guards left and only scattered buildings of various types left, 12 carrier-based fighter jets suddenly flew from the seaside and rushed towards an elite Apocalypse tank of the Wolf Group. Seeing these carrier-based fighter jets, Wang Ling immediately thought of aircraft carriers. Sure enough, he pulled up the electronic video and saw that there were 4 aircraft carriers lined up next to the dock of Allied base number 14, and there were more than a dozen destroyers escorting them. This maritime force is also a powerful offensive force. Each of these carrier-based fighter jets carries a large number of torpedoes. If they really focus the fire, the elite Apocalypse tank may not be able to withstand it. This is not what Wang Ling wants to see. Every elite Apocalypse tank is very powerful. Difficult to cultivate. At that moment, Wang Ling gave up on other ground targets and transformed into air defense infantry, aiming at the carrier-based fighter jets in the air and blasting them. Boom, boom, boom. Dong 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 dong. After all, these carrier-based fighters are bargains, with much less armor and health than the invader fighters. As a 7-star ace-level air defense infantry, Wang Ling's firepower is equivalent to the combined firepower of 3 elite anti-aircraft crawlers. As a result, he was blocking here alone, and under the continuous bombardment, all 12 carrier-based fighter jets were shot down by him alone. At this time, those anti-aircraft crawler vehicles realized belatedly and rushed to Wang Ling's side, as if they wanted to share the subsequent air defense pressure. However, Wang Ling was not happy anymore, waving his hands like he was shooing away flies. "Why are you here to join in the fun? Go about your business, it's enough for me to be here." 4 aircraft carriers, and 12 carrier-based fighter jets will appear in each round. Although the number is large, it is not difficult for Wang Ling. Moreover, Wang Ling was worried that it would be difficult for the anti-aircraft infantry to be promoted to the top 10-star soldier king. Now that he encountered a ship-based fighter jet that could be continuously reproduced, he was just as sleepy as a pillow. How could he not gain experience? Reason. The group of anti-aircraft crawlers had no choice. After shaking for a while, they could only leave here and continue to participate in the battle with other members of the Wolf Group. After another fierce battle for a period of time, they finally completely eliminated the ground troops and a building in the space. Not a single soldier was left, and except for some hyperdimensional mining vehicles transported outside, not a single tank was left. At this time, out of the originally majestic and powerful Allied base number 14, only the Navy was left to resist. After wiping out the ground troops, a group of members of the Wolf Group, led by their respective captains, wanted to get closer to the coastline and wipe out all the remaining Allied navies. But in the end, he was intercepted by Wang Ling. "What a joke, this is a rare scene where you can gain experience for anti-aircraft infantry, how could you let them ruin it?" Although the aircraft carrier can continuously reproduce carrier-based fighter jets, the reproduction time is a little longer. After the ground forces are completely wiped out and Wang Ling intercepts the attack of the Wolf Group members, the second round of carrier-based fighter jets just after all production was completed, they all flew out of the aircraft carrier. This time, it seemed that they were aware of Wang Ling's danger. This group of carrier-based fighter jets ignored the other Wolf Group tanks and all flew towards Wang Ling. Dong 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 dong. Dong 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 dong. However, Wang Ling himself represents the firepower of 3 elite anti-aircraft crawler vehicles. How can he make them achieve their wishes? Without letting other tracked vehicles participate in the battle, he shot down all the carrier-based fighter jets midway through a series of bombardments. The battle has reached this point. Except for the Navy who were deliberately left behind by Wang Ling, the battle can be said to be over. The other members of the Wolf Group are not in a hurry and simply stationed aside. Wang Ling was even more patient, waiting round after round and bombarding round after round. None of the carrier-based fighter jets that flew out could escape his bombardment. In this way, from late at night to dawn, Wang Ling couldn't remember how many carrier-based fighter jets he shot down. In addition, with the rocket pilots who had bombarded the Allied forces before, all these experiences were added together. His anti-aircraft infantry's the soldier finally successfully advanced to the 10-star soldier king. At this moment, Wang Ling's mind was immediately instilled with military experience over and over again. His body was slightly strengthened, and his anti-aircraft gun barrel was also strengthened again. Compared with the Soldier King level enhancement of the magnetic blast infantry, the final enhancement of the anti-aircraft infantry is a bit simpler. It is no different from the previous enhancements and ends quickly. This is normal. The enhancement of the magnetic blast infantry was specially designed for Wang Ling. Especially the changes in weapons have made it very suitable for Wang Ling until now. It is naturally more laborious to strengthen it. But the final strengthening of this anti-aircraft infantry is, to put it bluntly, just a further strengthening on the original basis, so naturally it is not that strenuous. However, Wang Ling felt quite happy to be able to upgrade this unit to the top level, even without so many fancy functions. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 360. To be honest, unranked air defense infantry is simply useless to the coalition forces. Its air defense capability is far inferior to that of anti-aircraft guns and anti-aircraft tracked vehicles. To put it bluntly, it is just to fill up the numbers. When Wang Ling switched arms, it was because he had no other options. However, as the level of anti-aircraft infantry increased, Wang Ling also gradually tasted the benefits. Under the law of true fragrance, he also began to like this unit. However, it is too laborious to upgrade this unit. Compared with infantry, the Allied Air Force is still a minority, and there are always anti-aircraft tracked vehicles and anti-aircraft guns to gain experience. Upgrading is even more difficult. Well now, the Allied aircraft carriers are simply like gift-giving boys. No, it should be said that he was a kind person who donated his experience. The continuous reproduction of carrier-based fighter jets happened to make up for this shortcoming, allowing Wang Ling to reach the 7-star ace some time ago, and now he has reached the level of the king of soldiers. Wang Ling, what a joy! This extra-dimensional system, as well as the red alert world, simply existed to strengthen Wang Ling. Although Wang Ling never knew what the person behind the gift of the system had in mind, before he finally met the person behind it, he still improve your abilities as much as possible. There are two things to improve his ability. One is to inject physical strength enhancer. This Wang Ling has already passed the intermediate enhancement and is waiting for the advanced redemption to unlock the advanced enhancer. In addition, there are the skills and weapons of various types of soldiers. This must be upgraded to the 10-star Soldier King level in the Red Alert world. The upgrade of 7 stars to 10 stars is of course very tempting in itself, and the enhancement of weapons, but the most important thing is that after the 10 stars are strengthened, you will receive gifts from the system, and you will also have corresponding weapons and abilities in reality. This is the most important thing. It's so important, and that's why Wang Ling is so happy. Of course, only he and Uncle He knew about his King of Soldiers level. No one else in the Red Alert world knew. Wang Ling shot down countless carrier-based fighter jets from dusk to dawn. Sun Dehe couldn't help but yawned, and asked, "Team leader, aren't you tired? You've been flying all night, isn't it enough? Jerking off." As soon as he heard this word, Wang Ling staggered and was a little confused about whether to laugh or cry. However, he was not angry. He just turned around and glared back, "Why are you so anxious? Just keep waiting." Sun Dehe was speechless. Now that he has reached the level of King of Soldiers, Wang Ling can completely order the annihilation of all the navies at Allied Base number 14, but having just been promoted, Wang Ling is also interested in trying the power of this new level. After waiting for a while, the 4 aircraft carriers finally tirelessly produced a new round of carrier-based fighter jets, flew out of the aircraft carriers, and continued flying towards Wang Ling. Well done. Wang Lingling was so happy that he picked up the barrel and fired wildly. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. After firing 2 rounds of artillery fire in a row, Wang Ling was also a little surprised. During the 7-star ace, he could fire 4 artillery shells in one breath. The range was extremely long and the power was huge. It was equivalent to the combined firepower of 3 elite anti-aircraft tracked vehicles. The King of Soldiers level anti-aircraft infantry has a longer range, greater power, higher firing frequency, and can fire 5 artillery shells in one breath. According to preliminary estimates, his current anti-aircraft firepower is about the same as that of 5 elite anti-aircraft tracked vehicles combined. If the 5 elite tracked vehicles were put together on the outside of the base, the 3 Kirov airships would not be able to break into the base and would have to be beaten down. What is this concept? This shows that Wang Ling's own anti-aircraft firepower is strong enough to intercept the Kirov airship. The Kirov airships were able to intercept them, not to mention the fragile carrier-based fighter jets. Wang Ling only bombarded them with 2 or 3 rounds, and all 12 carrier-based fighter jets were shot down. The efficiency was even higher than before. Much higher. Ha ha ha, what a pleasure, Wang Ling laughed, very wildly. When the other members of the wolf group saw Wang Ling's sudden increase in firepower, they were all dumbfounded. This cheap team leader is getting more and more powerful. Ha ha ha. Wang Ling didn't care about other people's opinions. After testing out this power, he was still excited. Although he didn't know what the significance of such a strong air defense capability would be if he brought it to the real world, but if it can be strengthened, why not do it? After laughing, Wang Ling finally calmed down. He put down the gun barrel without saying anything, licked his lips, and looked at the aircraft carrier in the electronic video that was still brewing a new round of carrier-based fighter jets. He rolled his eyes. Don't let this natural opportunity to gain experience go to waste. My air defense experience is already full, so there's no point in gaining more experience, so I might as well. Thinking of this, Wang Ling had an idea. Where's the anti-aircraft tracked vehicle? Come here, the Allied aircraft carriers are here to send you experience. If you don't get it, you won't get it. Under his order, the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles drove over obediently and parked next to Wang Ling. But represented by Sun Dehua, other people in the wolf group who were very familiar with Wang Ling slapped their big hands on the face. Hey, this group leader is getting cheaper and cheaper. Hey, you bastards, what are you talking about? Isn't this for the development of the wolf group? Upgrading the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle will only benefit us and not harm us. Wang Ling noticed their actions at this time and became unhappy. Started to curse as soon as he opened his mouth. Fortunately, the others were more or less used to Wang Ling's approach, and they just shrugged their shoulders and didn't say anything more. Wang Ling was relaxed now. He handed over the defense line directly to the crawler vehicles, but he stepped aside and sat down leisurely, waiting for all the crawler vehicles to advance to the elite level. While waiting, the Allies produced 2 more carrier-based fighter jets. As you can imagine, all of them were shot down by tracked vehicles, and one of the tracked vehicles that had originally reached the 1-star veteran level was finally successfully upgraded to the elite level. Wang Ling was very happy to see it. However, just when Wang Ling was planning to advance all tracked vehicles to the elite level, the Navy at Allied Base No. 14 protested. The entire dock was dismantled in a short period of time, and the aircraft carrier was no longer available. The carrier-based fighter jets flew out, but under the escort of the surrounding destroyers, they abandoned Base 14 and sailed towards another coastal base. There seemed to be a faint voice in the air, "I won't play with you." What the hell, did you just run away like that? You are a bunch of bastards. After Wang Ling saw it, he was stunned for a moment, then couldn't help it, jumped up and cursed. This was a rare opportunity to gain experience, but they just let it go.